From out of nowhere, terror strikes. Killer bolt in outer space. On an ordinary day, in an ordinary town,
What's going on right? What is that in the sky?
something extraordinary happens. A simple bolt traveling in outer space hits a USA communications satellite. Chaos erupts. Televisions go out.
What?
My TV went out. Why? Why?
Cell phones stop working.
How long has your phone been dead?
Like a half an hour.
Jan, call an ambulance! Call the ambulance!
911 doesn't work.
Take it easy, deep breaths, deep breaths.
Hey guys, we haven't had a call all day. You think there's something wrong with our 911 system?
Yeah.
Are we delving into mysteries we weren't meant to know?
I say there are things better left unsolved.
Is mankind challenging powers behind cosmic barriers?
Possible, unbelievable, fantastic. But I tell you, it could happen. It could happen. It could happen. It could happen.
Hi, I'm Steven.
And I'm Trace.
You just saw a movie trailer that demonstrates what could happen if space junk continues to be left up in space.
What is space junk? Space junk is thousands of bolts, nuts, and other debris from other space missions that are now orbiting the Earth at 17,000 miles per hour.
Right now we have 3,500 tons of space junk in space. Imagine this, a simple piece of space junk traveling at bullet speed can hit a satellite, causing chaos on Earth.
We need communication satellites for life-saving services such as 911 emergencies, search and rescue operations, plane crashes, train crashes. Basically, all emergency communications would stop.
So communication satellites need to be protected, but how?
Some countries, mainly the United States, want to put space weapons in outer space to protect our satellites. Today, some people think that space weapons could be the new genie.
In our last film, we explained how the nuclear genie was released and the horrible devastation it caused over 60 years ago in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
A genie that is still contained.
Trapped.
So should the space weapons genie be released? Because like the nuclear genie, once it's released, there's no turning back.
Trace and I may be just kids, but decisions are being made now about space weapons that are affecting our future.
And our children's future.
Should the space weapons genie be released, or should it be contained forever?
This is our story, the final frontier. Explorers
Or warriors?
We wanted to talk to an expert in the area of space weapons, so we went to Carnegie International Non-Proliferation Conference in Washington, D.C., and we met with Theresa Hitchens, the director of the Center for Defense Information. What are space weapons?
There are a lot of different definitions for them, but the one that's usually used amongst those of us who work on the issue of space weapons is any weapon that's based on the ground, in the air, at sea, or in space, designed to hit something in space. Space weapons can also be weapons that are based in space, so they're in orbit, designed to hit either a satellite, a missile, or a target on the Earth.
What are the similarities between the race for the atomic bomb and the race for space weapons?
There are a lot of similarities. Essentially, it's the idea of the race. Right now, no one has space weapons. No one's ever put a space weapon in place. There are several countries, particularly the United States and China, who are looking at the possibility of doing this. And what happens is when one country says we're going to pursue space weapons, then the next country says we're going to pursue space weapons because they are, and then the third country says, and it goes and goes. So it creates its own circle, a vicious circle of activity. No major country could afford, if any country put space weapons up, to not try to do the same thing.
How can space weapons be used in a positive way?
I don't see space weapons being positive in any way. There are several problems with them. One is if you start blowing up satellites in space, you create a bunch of space debris, space junk. And there's already a whole lot of space junk up there, so much that NASA is very worried about things like the International Space Station and the Space Shuttle. And a war in space would create a lot more space debris that stays up there for a long time and presents a challenge or a possible threat to anything else in space. One of the interesting things people don't know is that even something as small as a marble can blast a satellite to bits because of the speeds at which things are flying around up there. So I don't see there's any good way to have a space war, therefore I don't see there's any good reason to have a space weapon.
We felt we needed to talk to someone that was for space weapons. So we talked to Everett Dolman, professor of military studies at the U.S. Air Force School.
Those who would place weapons in space want to continue to use space. They would design their weapons to make less, not more, space debris. Indeed, one of the more benign uses of a space weapon we could imagine, in this case, say a space laser, might be to destroy existing space junk so as to make orbits safer than they are today. A space weapons program would be very expensive, tens if not hundreds of billions of dollars. The trade-off is that this new military organization would have the ability to project a small amount of very precise, very deadly violence anywhere on the Earth in a very, very short time. And I think overall this is a good thing.
What I'd like to leave people watching this video with is the understanding that an arms race in space, the development of space weapons, will make us all worse off in space. And it will dampen the dreams of generations of kids who would like to someday be a part of the future exploration of space.
While we were in Washington, we decided to talk to some other people about space weapons. They had some really good answers.
What are your views on space weapons?
Well, basically they're a terrible idea. It really is simply something we should not do. Racing space weapons, it's almost certain there would be a loser because at some point something will go wrong and we'll have a nightmare we all want to try and avoid.
Better that nuclear explosion should be used as a propellant for spaceships to visit nearby solar systems, and we learn more about the universe.
Well, I don't think they're a very good idea. I think it would expand the whole arms race into space, and that just shouldn't take place. And the U.S. should show leadership and abandon any plans for developing weapons in space.
We ought to keep the places that are peaceful in the solar system peaceful and try to make this place, which is so full of war and violence, more peaceful. Instead of exporting violence to outer space, we ought to import some of the peace from there and learn how to live with each other.
After hearing all these things about space weapons, we wanted to hear from someone that actually been in space, like an astronaut or something.
So who's the most famous U.S. astronaut alive today?
Remember the movie The Right Stuff? We flew out to Columbus, Ohio to interview the first U.S. astronaut to orbit Earth, Senator John Glen.
Special equipment has been installed here at the press site for them.
A shower of glory for a new American hero.
Steve and I have been reading a lot about space weapons and whether this should be made or not. So as an astronaut and politician, what's your opinion on space warfare?
Well, unfortunately, history shows that everywhere people have learned to travel, they've learned to conduct warfare. That's not very encouraging. But most of the time I was in the U.S. Senate, there were a lot of things I was involved with where that's exactly what we hope to do, is to keep weapons out of space. And you can make observation platforms and things like that up there, but as far as actual weaponry in space, we've gone against that, and I hope that we don't get over that, because that would create a whole new competition among nations to have weaponry in space, and I hope we can avoid that.
Do you think it's realistic to keep space peaceful?
I think it is realistic, and it's going to require the best efforts of everyone. You know, we have nations that adjust themselves in power from time to time. We were up against the Soviet Union in what we called the Cold War, and that went on for many, many years. We're pretty much past that now. We are past that now. We have the rising power of China that gives some people concern. I think we should be working very, very closely with all those nations that have the capability of producing weapons, particularly nuclear weapons. That would be the biggest danger in space. You have your number of nations that actually have nuclear weapons and have a space capability is still fairly small, and I hope we can keep it small.
Well, we agree that international waters should be used for peaceful purposes, and yet many countries maintain navies to protect that right for themselves and others. We agree domestically in this country that no one should use violence against another person, and yet we maintain police in case someone does. Weapons and peace often go hand in hand, and this is why I advocate weapons in space.
Do you think space warfare would be dangerous for the future of space tourism or space exploration?
If we got space warfare, it would be dangerous not only for tourism, it's going to be dangerous for everybody right here on Earth, because you'd have things like the nuclear fallout, you'd have radiation sickness around the world probably if we ever got going on something like that. You've had EMP, electromagnetic pulse, that interferes with communications here on Earth if we ever got into nuclear weapons in space. So there are a whole host of things. So I think it would pretty much kill the idea of space tourism, but it might kill a lot of other things right here on Earth right along with it.
Imagine the notoriety a terrorist organization could get by launching a missile at the first commercial passenger-carrying spaceship. What publicity it would gain. With U.S. weapons in space, however, such an attempt could potentially be stopped.
Space so far has been used pretty much for observation and for control purposes. And I hope we can keep on doing that. And the more we use space for those peaceful purposes, I hope it sets the stage that we can keep it space and not have weaponry in space. Once you break that dam and start the weaponry in space, well, you're down a track there that's going to be an international competition that is very, very difficult to control. So I hope we can avoid putting any weaponry in space. And I want to see us cooperate as much as possible in space rather than setting up another competition like we had with the Soviets.
As our knowledge of this universe in which we live increases, may God grant us the wisdom and guidance to use it wisely.
We started to wonder, space weapons may become the real Star Wars. So what do Star Wars fans think of this?
What do you think space weapons are?
Space weapons to me would be mostly alienish weapons.
Do you think it'd be expensive?
Yep, definitely.
How much money do you think it cost?
$3 million, I would guess.
Do you think that the United States should be the only one in charge of outer space?
No.
Who else should be?
Texas.
What do you think about space weapons?
They're very impressive and will have practical use in the future.
Well, if they help protect our country, I think that's okay.
I think they're key to the development of our future. Move along. Bye-bye.
A theater of war is also thought of as an area of operations, in this case, a medium where war can be conducted. Although it is possible to conduct a war in one theater or medium, today most wars between states are fought in the land, on the sea, and in the air. And many people envision the day when war will also be fought in space. Some think war may someday be fought in cyberspace.
Do you want outer space to have war, or do you want it to be peaceful?
Peaceful.
Do the bad guys ever win?
The good guys always win the movies, but the bad guys might win in real life.
Do you think the United States will win and they'll be the Jedi?
Maybe, yeah.
If the United States don't win, who do you think will win?
Missouri.
I would be delighted to see a meaningful and workable international treaty to jointly manage the commons of outer space, including the possibility of a multinational peacekeeping force in outer space. But I vigorously oppose a ban on weapons in space, because these bans simply don't work. If the United States were to oblige itself not to put weapons in space, it would give another state or organization the go-ahead to secretly develop or quickly deploy a large amount of weapons in space that could then be used to take space for themselves and to deny it to all others. By then, the U.S. or other peace-preferring states may have no choice but to go to war or to give in to the demands of that future space power.
We don't have weapons in space at the moment. It's an idea. Some people think that the idea can work. Some people think the idea cannot work. That is not the issue. The issue is that space was meant as a place of peace, as a place of unity between nations, and not as a place of war. And I think the most important point about stopping the weaponization of space is that it has not yet happened, and we must keep space for peace.
Putting real Star Wars weapons in space affects everybody in the world.
As humans, we're curious about new frontiers. Space is our new frontier. Whether we explore it peacefully is up to us.
Do we need space weapons to protect ourselves from space warriors? Space warriors from our own planet Earth?
Should space remain peaceful, or should it be the next frontier of warfare?
So what do you think? Should the space weapon genie be released or contained?
You decide.
I can feel the sufferings of millions, and yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come right. That this cruelty, too, will end, and that peace and tranquility will return.